What's up, friends? Welcome back to the show. Today in the studio, I sat across from Abel James. Abel used to be known as the fat-burning man when he dominated the podcast scene. He had the top health and wellness podcast for almost 5 years with his show, The Fat-Burning Man. So you don't post that many podcasts and kind of reign supreme on the podcast hill without learning a bunch of stuff. He's interviewed over hundreds of experts, thousands of episodes, tons of hours just in the chair learning, and also lived a lot of life. Abel's got some fascinating stories in terms of how he tried to influence the Department of Education to getting clean food and why he was shut down. How that when we say seed oils are engine lubricant, that Abel can actually prove that because he lived and breathed in this industry and actually ran a car that he drove across country on seed oils. We talked a lot about AI and the future of education and the future of food and what we can expect for a world that we're going to inherit, and how to stay ready for that and kind of take advantage of the opportunities that are coming. So endlessly fascinating, very widely varied conversation, and a whole lot of fun with a very wise man, Mr. Abel James. Let's get to it. Abel, welcome to the show, my friend. The OGs and the diehards in the ancestral paleosphere, whatever you want to call it, might recognize your name as the fat-burning man. I certainly did. When I heard that and a friend connected, I was like, wait, the fat-burning man, that guy, Abel? And here we are doing it. Like, you've been in the game in the health game for probably 20 years or so, and in the podcasting game for probably a decade or more. It's a big question, but what got you into all this?
Yeah, well, I've always been really interested in fitness and performance and sports growing up, that sort of thing. But it wasn't until I got sick by trying to follow my doctor's advice over the course of time, it eventually made me sick and manifested the very conditions that I was trying to prevent, like high triglycerides. And basically, long story short, I was eating whole grains. I was reducing my dietary cholesterol and saturated fat intake and being a good guy.
You're being a good boy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so like I noticed that my friends around me who in many ways were very much better than I was, because I was putting on weight. My thyroid started just not working well, and I hit rock bottom health-wise in my early 20s. And so when that happened, I kind of had a reckoning when I lost everything in an apartment fire and just saw that I was fat, inflamed, unhappy, like had to be honest about the fact that this wasn't working. And I was still running, like 20, 30 plus miles a week. Like I was still putting in the work, but I needed a radically different approach. And it wasn't until I changed that and really embraced intermittent fasting, I found the world of cyclic ketogenic dieting, and combined that with kind of where I came from, which was my family was into holistic medicine. I grew up in the backwoods in New Hampshire. And so like cool. Homemade tinctures and smelly balms and herbs were always kind of part of that equation. So marrying the two, I was able to get incredible results outside of the pharmaceuticals I was on and all of the advice that I was following that turned out to hurt me in the end. So I got mad enough about that I started writing about it in the early blogosphere, and then ultimately that turned into a podcast and giving it the tongue-in-cheek name that's kind of memorable. I come from the world of music. I've been a musician my whole life. Right. And so I thought of the phrase or words fat-burning man as being kind of like silly and memorable, and being somewhat of an outsider. Though I did get, a quality education, I didn't continue to get a PhD or an MD or anything like that. So being in the world of health, sometimes not having those guardrails intellectually can be very helpful, because I can see things from a completely different perspective. I can say whatever I want. I can ask whatever I want, and have the real experts talk about their area of genius unrestricted. Yes. For the most part. So that's been a large focus of my work, taking these advanced and complex ideas from people who are out there in the field and down in the rabbit holes, and trying to turn that into actionable advice for like real people who have, a few minutes to listen to a long form conversation about health, or read a book and that sort of thing. So getting out there in whatever way I can through writing and audio and video, but mostly long form has been the focus.
That's really cool, man. I like that you said that not going deeper into the education, or the classical education, I guess, like going down the route of a PhD. Paul Chek, I know you're familiar with him, actually. I know you've had him on your podcast. He always has these funny little aphorisms for that. He says, like, PhD stands for progressive head death or piled higher in dogma. and it's that, like, don't confuse your education for what might be indoctrination in some ways, that when you actually followed all of the advice that is coming downstream of the educational institutions was when you actually got your sickest.
Yeah.
And it resonates with my journey so much because I joke and I say it was a dietitian's wet dream. I was doing all of it right. And I was young at the time. I was in my early 20s. I should have been fit, especially for the amount I was training. I was always into athletics. And I wasn't. I was inflamed and my knees hurt. And you were very instrumental at the beginning of my health journey. This would have been for me probably back around 2010. Because I became aware of, by just a divine stroke of luck, the paleosphere, I guess, and Mark Sisson. And then I found your podcast and consumed so much of that. And that was my education. And funnily enough, I was going to university at the time and getting a different form of education, which now, you know, I feel the same way about it. I'm glad I didn't continue to go down that route and actually similarly used a lot of my anger a little bit about why don't I know this and why doesn't anybody know this and why am I sick and why are my parents sick, and I lost a lot of people in my life way too early from diseases that could have been at least offset by potentially decades if they knew some of this information. So I had a file it under my butt, and it was similar. I was like, I'm gonna try and give this forward. And you know, you were one of those voices. You were one of those early adopters in that space, like along with Mark's Daily Apple and your blog and then the podcast. So I owe you a debt of gratitude too, man, because it does take a little bit of a fire under your butt to do it, especially at that time. Like now everybody's got a podcast, right? Everybody can be an influencer or pick up the phone, but not necessarily back then. No. So what was it like getting started? It sounds like you transitioned more from the writing to the podcast. When did the crossover happen?
Yeah, it actually happened when I was at the same time as I was writing and kind of in this transition. I was playing 100 to 200 live music shows, mostly around Austin, but really on tour sometimes all around the country. And so I was doing all of these live shows, but felt like it wasn't, especially music then, like CD sales were starting to go away. So you didn't really have anything to sell. And you didn't have the one-to-many approach that was starting to come up in the internet. So I was doing early live streaming way back in like 2008 and 2009, live streaming shows and that sort of thing. And I already had the gear for the music shows, which you would need to do a podcast, you know, the interface and all the cables and the right microphone, that sort of thing. So, and I knew how to build websites. And so enough people told me, they're just like, hey, you're Mr. Radio Voice. Like people just gave me that as a nickname, which mostly is a side effect of me singing for a long time or whatever. But enough people said that. They're like, you should start a podcast. I'm like, what's a podcast? But enough people said that, and I just kind of saw that when I looked into it back then, that there were a few shows, but they didn't treat it that seriously from the listener's perspective in terms of like time management, right? So there were lots of great podcasts that had really cool ideas, but they were wrapped up in a 2 or 3 hour conversation of people like talking about what happened on Tuesday and what's going on at the gym and like current events and that sort of thing. So what I wanted to do was create something that was well-researched and actionable and distills down some of these ideas into a conversation where you can hopefully take away some things that you can use the next day or right away, which is a huge challenge for a lot of these people who are scientists or MDs or really at the top of their fields, because that's not their business or area of expertise, like their expertise is. And so I found that middle ground of being able to communicate with people who may be highly intelligent but don't have the time to learn all of the medical jargon and the details. They don't need all of the details, but they do once they kind of get the ideas that they can put into action, get great results by listening and kind of absorbing it, testing it out for themselves, and then seeing how that plays out over time. So that's really built and contributed to hopefully a larger community of people who have, you know, the names come and go, whether it's brands or movements and what they're called, you know, from ancestral health, paleo, keto, biohacking, health optimization, like it's all West N.A. Price and like Banting. There are so many low carb. It doesn't really matter what you call some of these things, because if there's a group of people who are devoted to healing themselves and the people around them, mostly through lifestyle, then that's really something worth rallying around. And I'm happy to say and glad to see that many of the messages have gotten out there. But at the same time, there's still a lot of work to do. Sometimes it's frustrating, sometimes it's encouraging, but it's definitely an incredibly meaningful way to spend time and energy.
Right on. Yeah, sadly, tragically almost, there's never going to be a shortage of people that are looking to heal themselves, like you said, because it increasingly seems that we're getting sicker and sicker, and I'm sure we'll touch on some of the reasons for that. But you have to be well positioned to hopefully, pay it back and give people some, good actionable advice, like you said.
Yeah.
Because you've done over 1,000 interviews and, on different guest podcasts and things like that, and written in a New York Times best-selling book and all of it. I'm curious, because you said something earlier on, which I think is a real privilege to be the podcast host, because in many ways you get to be the dumbest person in the room and just be a sponge and ask your very pointed questions and just hope that the listener gets to benefit from that. So with that on the table, like, having done so many episodes with you've interviewed the who's who, in particular in the health space, alternative health space, ancestral space, who like surprised you the most, or who was the one guest that really stands out as like a paradigm shatterer, or just a cool story in that sense? Who stands out?
I mean, Dr. Jack Kruse.
Oh, he'll do that.
Has been now, I met him I think 13 14 years ago now, and we've kept in touch and been friends for a long time. And so continuously, without a doubt and without an exception, every time it's just earth shattering. And knowing him personally as well is pretty incredible, because everyone is definitely a real person.
Yes.
And trying to reconcile the area of genius with the rest of the person sometimes is an incredible mess of ideas and concepts. And ultimately, when you see people over the longer term and different stages of life, you can kind of see how their ideas and concepts play out, whether it's in their own life or around them, and whether people still rally around those ideas. And so I'm very interested by people like Jack, who not only have incredible ideas, but have also built just mind-blowing communities across the world in places like El Salvador or Florida, New Orleans and Tennessee and that sort of thing. But of course, people like Rob Wolf, Mark Sisson, Nora Goodgoddess, Terry Walls, and endless other names, like being able to talk to them 12, 13 years ago and then check in every few years. The doctors, Dr. William Davis, the Perlmutters, and so many others. It's just fascinating following what is new and what is emerging, and also how the public consciousness has changed around certain ideas, like which ones just aren't landing, and why, though we were talking about seed oils and vegetable oils being a huge problem more than 15 years ago or whatever. Right. I was actually a consultant in the oil industry, including vegetable oils and that sort of thing, repurposing vegetable oil grease for use in boats and automotive and machines and that sort of thing. And so knowing it from that perspective, it's interesting and encouraging to see in the past couple of years that people are finally really listening and putting it into action, and restaurants are actually dedicating themselves to not having some of these toxic products and gear oils sold as food in their restaurants. So really amazing to be at. I can't believe so many years have gone by, and I'm I used to be the young guy or whatever, and it is interesting just to kind of see the waves come and go. But being around for a long time, more than anything, having the relationships with these people who have been thought leaders for a long time is such a gift, because we can try to help guide together where the world is going based upon, what messages do need to get out there right now. And that's always changing.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of cool that you get to be, for want of a better term, like a wise elder in this space now with the new blood coming in, because what that tells me is there's some longevity to the things you were uncovering. So whilst the terms update, like, it is funny, you're right. I became aware of vegetable oils a decade or so ago, and I had a hashtag for a long time that I was using, vegetable oils are dog shit, and it got no traction and no conversation. And nobody even used to call them seed oils, right? Everybody just called them veggie oils and vegetable oils, and now it's seed oils, and it just, like, it caught fire eventually, but it needed I guess it just needed that persistence, man. It just needed it. And without you guys and some of those names you just mentioned, the Rob Wolfs, the Sissons of the world, it just would have fizzled out eventually, I guess. So it's a testament to the longevity and getting to see, like, oh yeah, we were onto something. We were right, because it is you're buried in a myriad of information, conflicting information. And back then the vegan thing wasn't that popular, and then that got really popular more recently. So, like, if you're not so grounded and rooted in that and like truly believing in it and living it and experiencing it, I can see how it is very easy for people to get just completely overwhelmed by the noise and not know which way is up or down or which way is right or wrong.
Especially now. It's a fire hose.
Especially now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? I do have to ask you about Jack a little bit more, Jack Kruse, because what an interesting mind, what an interesting character. Talk about just being unapologetically himself. What do you think makes Jack Kruse special?
He is right about enough mind-blowing ideas that other people that aren't even on their radar.
Yeah.
That he's not only worth paying attention to, but ultimately studying and really researching. That doesn't mean that he's 100% correct, and he also willingly and generously admits that from time to time, especially in his own way. But I don't think many people understand that the whole cold thermogenesis, cold plunge, and red light, sunlight thing really came from Jack.
Yeah.
I mean, it came from his work. And that, of course, there are certain people who are well aware of that and follow Jack almost religiously. But many others are just kind of like hopping on all these protocols or just, thinking that the person who said it on a recent podcast or put it into their protocol is the one who the idea came from. And that's not only true for, like I remember having Jack on the podcast for the first time, and he was my first guest to ever do an interview in the bathtub with ice, and you could just hear him floating around the ice. like he was swimming in a margarita or something, or a Jack on the rocks. But it was one of these things where completely unapologetically him. And I think because he is 100% him and has a particular style of communication that can be very abrasive to some, and that's very much on purpose. He's trying to give a punch in the mouth to people so that they listen. That's his communication style. That's one thing that's not going to be popular with the one-to-many approach. Like, he's not going to be with the talking heads on daytime TV anytime soon. But so often that's true with the people who are ahead of their time, eccentrics, and they're just not allowed in the public sphere because their ideas are too dangerous. They're too forward-looking. But at the same time, like with music, when you find a band that you like, going to their influences and understanding where that sound came from. It's like, oh, Stevie Ray Vaughan listens to Jimi Hendrix, who listens to early blues players. And like, you go back and you follow that lineage. That's an incredible thing to do for your own mind and for your own understanding. And so if you have any inclination to follow things like circadian biology, or you're into cold plunges, red light therapy, sunlight, metabolic health, mitochondria, all of that, look into the OGs, because they've been there fighting the fight for a long time, and they're still doing it and still coming up with ideas that you haven't heard about yet.
And almost like just in a very respectable way, because those people that were back on the front lines of this message 15 years ago or so, they didn't have a lot of the other talking heads that are regurgitating information. They were like finding it. They were deep in the weeds. They were like digging it out. Late nights, I imagine, lots of coffee or sunlight or cold plunging if you're Jack, whatever it is. But it's just like, it's so... Now it's a lot easier to get access to this information, which is wonderful, because the ease of access can hopefully influence the spread. Like, can we make health and wellness as infectious as disease now with so many voices, which would be awesome to do. But back then, there was barely a social media presence. There wasn't like a dozen podcasts to listen to. So the OGs and understanding like where they came from and what motivated and drove them and the respect that they deserve is so undervalued sometimes, I think, because we just... in the information economy that we have now, it's just like a new guy or a new girl. They have the moment of fame, and then it's the next one. We forget. Yeah,
and that's really been accelerated over time. It seems like it's in many ways easier to come out of nowhere and just bubble up and be a huge sensation. But your time in the sun is probably shorter than even the 15 minutes it used to be in many ways. So trying to parlay that sort of experience into a longer-term career for the people who have that interest is the challenge now, where it used to be lots of technological hurdles to running websites and streaming media and that sort of thing. And a lot of costs, too, by the way, to have people on the team who had the technological capability to pull a lot of this stuff off, especially at scale. Now it's a battle of how are you heard, but also for the people, and this has been interesting, keeping in touch with a lot of the people who are really at the forefront and the thought leaders. I've heard repeatedly that they're a bit and frustrated isn't the right word, but it's the vibe kind of that comes off, where they have been writing the books about this and doing the research for 2+ decades.
Yes.
And they are having a hard time getting followers and a book deal because they're not dancing on TikTok. And the people who are dancing on TikTok, many times parroting their ideas and sometimes getting them slightly wrong, have millions of followers.
Yeah.
And they're getting book deals, but like don't know what to write about and can't write because they're just copying. So like, how do you, not that they need the credit, because that's not what they're after, but we do need the people who are doing the work to be able to continue to do the work.
That's right.
And so I'm not sure how we get through that, aside from just being real humans again and trying to support each other as much as we possibly can. I think especially in the age of AI now, where we don't know what's true and what's not, and who's real and who's fake, or if what you're watching or listening to is generated or not, doubling down on the real human relationships that you know for a fact are real is going to be our saving grace in the years ahead. I think just really coming together as communities and using digital technology as a tool to enhance the real life connections instead of the opposite that we've been forced into for many years.
This is a really interesting point. I don't think I've ever thought of it in this way, in kind of how you're positioning it here, that like myself, and I always try my best to do this and name who I got inspired by and acknowledge that we're all standing on the shoulders of giants. And in a way, I've kind of like taken my approach as like the Bruce Lee one: adopt what's useful, reject what's not. But none of them are my ideas, really.
Sure.
I am parroting a lot of this stuff, and I tried to give as much credit where credit is due for that. And I'm just putting my own language on it and presenting it in a way that's useful. But what's interesting about that is, you're right, the idea generators of the machine are not the ones going super viral now. And what happens when they're gone? Because we've got a bunch of people that are really good at parroting and regurgitating the information. But what happens when the actual, the scouts that are going over the enemy lines and finding all this information are gone? That's a really interesting predicament we could find ourselves in.
And hopefully enough of the bigger players, like publishers or kind of a new form of publishing, there are people who understand this problem and definitely tip their hats to people who have come before and done some of this work. So I think there is hope, but it's definitely something that we'll need to figure out. And also not to disparage the people who are parroting ideas or regurgitating information. That's really the goal, ultimately. Right. As long as you're doing it correctly and not getting the ideas wrong or twisting them for clickbait or whatever that whole thing is. Like, as long as you're staying true to the message, that is the goal, that it spreads, and attribution isn't necessary really or expected in the age of AI. Once again, I don't think that it's, as wonderful as it would be. And now that I think about it on the spot, AI probably will be the saving grace of that too, because it'll ultimately go back and be able to track some of these ideas to see where did they generate from. So I think that there's a lot to look forward to, and in whatever way possible, if people's gifts are being out there and delivering short form content that gets ideas across, I think that's great. But I would encourage people to go long form, read the books, because you can definitely drive a lot of attention and engagement through short form, but it's difficult to communicate meaningful ideas in 15, 30, 60 seconds. It really takes time to not only deliver that message, but sit down with a message and really experience it.
What on earth is that?
It's divine.
You know what that is?
Frank.
That's hilarious. That is my wife is on my Spotify account, and she's playing what is that song? That's like when the moon hits your eye. So that, what's probably happening is my son is eating pizza right now. Because my 5-year-old, when he eats pizza, he says, "Can we play That's Amore?"
That's what you have to do. I love that.
Isn't that an interesting little divine interruption? We can probably leave that in there. I think that's pretty funny. So good. Hopefully Dean Martin doesn't come for our copyright or anything like that. Wow, how funny. But you were just like, you were onto something really popular there, and it's funny, like Dean Martin playing, like a lot of the times things they become more popular after the person is gone, and we take them for granted a lot of the time. Like famous philosopher Nietzsche only sold like $50 while he was alive, and now everybody quotes Nietzsche on social media, and I think it's this paying credence again to the people that we have why we're here. But you're dead on that the ultimate form of flattery for them is that their ideas do go viral and that they do get into the zeitgeist some way. And you mentioned like the people that are regurgitating that now and doing that service just have to be careful and ask, I guess, what they're optimizing for. Are they optimizing for virality or their time in the sun? Because like Icarus, if you get too close to the sun, you burn and fall from the stars. And I think there's an interesting cost to going too viral too, that people all think they want it. They want the recognition until they have it, and then like, oh, this is kind of weird.
Yeah.
And I think you've got some interesting ideas on fame and how you approach that. And it might be niched pseudo fame in a particular branch, but your show got pretty big, right? It got pretty big and you had a lot of recognition. And it seems like at certain times along the journey, you've just kind of like faded into obscurity purposefully, like decided like, okay, I'm going to step away for a little bit and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to tease this. Like, what's your thought process on all of that?
Yeah. It's an unpredictable thing knowing where my own, let's call it spiritual energy is at. But whatever that mojo is, that drive, a lot of people look at my bio or whatever and they're like, how did you do all of that? And I don't know, but it's definitely not something where it's rational and it's a use of energy and there's 0 out of 100 or numbers. It's not like that at all. It's me kind of sitting down, usually with an empty notebook outside in the sun and just being like, where is that free energy in the future where I'm feeling pulled toward it such that I don't need to push?
Yes.
And so that's led me down many, many paths. And with the music thing, I kind of reckoned with this at a young age. A lot of people are just like, especially other young musicians, they're like, I can't wait to be famous. I can't wait to be out there with thousands of people in the crowd watching me play and do my thing and bring them joy and all of that. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I really want that. I've never really been attracted to that as much as the somatic experience that music brings to your own body and the bodies of people around you, and the transformation of energy that can occur. It's just a magic to me. And I also love the training aspect and the side effects of training in music that kind of bleed over into other aspects of your life. And so when I'm thinking about where I'm going next, I don't want to retread too much. I want to be able to move forward and not feel like I'm doing something for the wrong reason or they're too long and all the rest of that. And so when the sun was shining and the podcast was hitting super hard and I'd been putting in the work, and my wife as well on our team for many years. We hit #1 in health for 5 years in a row in a bunch of different countries, as well as a New York Times best-selling book, and starred on a TV show on ABC all at the same time. And so that was very cool, but I was working really, really hard and knew that it wasn't something that I could do forever or would want to forever. And one of the reasons I transitioned away from playing so many live shows in music is because honestly, I was burnt out on it. I was working too hard for whatever was on the other side of that. And so I was sensitive to that going into the podcasting thing and going out there and kind of being a public figure or what have you. And it became a thing where, especially living in Austin at the time, and this was years ago, thankfully, and it's a fickle thing. So back then, when I was really out there and recognizable, walking around on the street just became something that I couldn't really do because I'd be walking with my dog, like picking up dog shit and just like holding a bag of it. And people were slamming on the brakes and coming up from the other side and taking pictures on Instagram, like without really respect for personal space and getting mobbed. It happened to people in my family. There was a little bit of stalking that happened. And I'm just like, all right, that romantic idea of escaping out to the mountains in nature and really having that moment. Why don't we not wait until we retire or whatever? Yeah. Why don't we try that out right now? Take a mini sabbatical, a mini just break, because we needed it. We've been working really, really hard, and in many ways, at least from our own perspective, selflessly trying to spread this message as far as possible. But it got to the point where it's like the people who were recognizing me then were recognizing me for the wrong reasons, because I was big, or because they thought their Instagram would be big if they took a picture with someone who had a big. Yeah. So I basically took a year off from the internet and put in some damage control, and had a few people on the team just keep things running. But I was basically off social media and off publishing new stuff for a good year, and did this a couple of times because the point then was to really go after spiritual growth. And also, now that the message was out there, you don't need me to keep going out there and saying the same stuff. And so that comes with many pros and cons. And I really am grateful that we did it when we did, because like with health, if you can make a small calibration when you're younger, where you end up is a dramatically different place if you follow that trend line. So I think spiritually speaking, that's also true. And it's very easy to get lost when you're having that moment in the sun, that moment of virality, or you're hitting it. And now, you know, I've been around many people who it's happened to, whether it's, you know, having an exit in the multi-$100 million or billions of dollars, or really getting into the public sphere. These things, knowing a lot of these people personally and having been through a bit of that myself, that was the first time I ever empathized with Justin Bieber and like some of these other, you know, spoiled little brat celebrities who were driving Lamborghinis through the neighborhood and just like doing coke and like pissing on the ruins in Mexico or whatever. Like, I didn't understand how that could ever happen. Now I really do, because it's or at least, you know, I would assume it's something where they need an escape from reality and to make all of this not real for a second. That doesn't exist for you when you're in that spot. And so I think that can be really trying for a lot of people. And so for us personally, I'm really glad to be able to turn those dials up and down and not pursue things, hopefully, for the wrong reasons. And if I do find that I'm conflicted about it, I usually don't have much of a problem being able to just say, all right, let's do something else next. That's not without its own struggle, though. You know, like from the outside looking in, I'm sure some people are just like, oh, that must be nice. But for me, I go through deep, you know, I go through ups, I go through deep downs. But it's usually in that downtime when I'm not above water financially, when I'm not sure what's coming next, that it's the prime territory or the prime substrate for the next great thing to come out of. And then my energy is free again, and I'm totally devoted to it. So I've gone through many of those, and I hope we all can, because especially these days, it's so noisy. The temptation is just keep going, keep your head down. But you really have to take a break from technology and take a break from your own life and day to day to embrace these moments, because man, time goes by fast. And old people always chatter on about that, and I remember thinking how stupid that was and how silly and cliched. And it's remarkable to me that I've been podcasting for as long as I have and doing this for such a long time, because people now come in, they're like, I have a podcast. I'm like, that's great, man. How long have you been doing it? And they're like, 2 years. I'm like, yeah, because that's a long time. It's a long time. But for me, 13 years doesn't feel like that long of a time in a weird way.
It's a very cool perspective, man. And I think you're right. A lot of people would hear that and say, well, that's it's a champagne problem, or like poor successful famous guy got fed up of fame. If I had it, I would enjoy it. It's like, no, you just don't know. You don't know until you're in it, but you have to have the wisdom to, like you said, like kind of either this spiritual compass or this moral compass to know that like I'm staying a little bit longer than I'm truly welcome here. Like, if you can't decide, the answer is no, or get out, if you're tuned enough to know that. And I think what's very impressive about the way you handled that is you kind of get what everybody is looking for in a certain kind of way. And this wasn't you taking a sabbatical in a lull period where everything's crumbling. This is you like walking away at the heights of the fame and the success, where most people are like, oh, if I just had that, you know, somehow I would be able to avoid all of the tripwires and crush this, and like all these other people that say things like money won't buy you happiness and fame isn't all it's cracked up to be. For some reason, these seem like impossible lessons that we've just got to fuck around and find out ourselves, you know?
Yeah.
But to walk away and actually go find your own peace and sanity. And you said like this aligned spiritual compass. That's really interesting to me, because it seems like stillness and disconnection is been a big part of that for you.
Definitely.
And it seems like music's been a big part of that for you too. Yeah. Like what are the things that you really lean into when you're looking for that clarity or that sanity, or however you want to? What do you do? What are some of the practices?
Space. It's a lot of space. And like I said before, it's just time, generally in silence, preferably outside, but sometimes at a coffee shop or a place that's a little more vibey and active, where you can hear the chattering and the clinking and smell the coffee. Like, I like the experience of that sometimes. So it could be out in nature, it could be, at a more active place. And everyone kind of has their own favorite places like this, right? Like, sometimes for me in college studying, it was the library. But when you open that space for yourself, it's a lot easier to ignore the noise and understand where your drives and motivations might be coming from. Because if you're deciding to devote your life and your time and energy to something, there's really nothing more important than that. But we don't often think about what we're doing. We just kind of fall into it. And that's what life does if we're not very intentional. So setting up this space and being honest with yourself and not requiring anything of yourself to say, I need to write 3,000 words today or something like that. Those sorts of prompts can be useful for some people. But what I would encourage everyone to do is just go out away from technology for a while. And if you do bring your phone, whatever, just put it on airplane mode or shut it off for a while. And just sit for a few minutes a day and wait until something comes out. And it could be just like, for me, that's how I write songs. That's how I come up with ideas for the next book, little stories. Oftentimes I find myself, this is really wonderful, especially for people now, to preserve some of the great conversations that you have in life and interactions or little stories or ideas. Our brains are not perfect at remembering the small details. We might remember the gist of a conversation, but not the small details and stories from people's lives. So the way that I often write my books is I'm continuously writing and sitting down for a few minutes every day and just having something come out. And so sometimes what wants to come out is a little interaction that I had the night before at a party or whatever, where it's like, oh, that's a very intriguing idea. Like, for example, I interacted with someone who, unlike me, I'm 40 years old, and it seems like people about our age and older are dragging their feet to release information that could be kind of private to the internet, to ChatGPT and to the algorithms and that sort of thing, because it's like icky. We don't want to be surveilled. Interacting with the younger people, they're just like, I'm going to give you as much as possible because I like watching cats ride skateboards. Give me more of that. And the more that they give, the more that they get of that. And so they see it as a value add for their own lives. And don't worry, they were digital natives. They're not worried about being surveilled. It's always been that way, right? Like, it's always been a part of the ecosystem. And so it's like kind of writing that down and cataloging that idea. For me, it's made it a lot more fun, not only to write that little story down, but actually play with AI tools with a greater degree of fun and freedom that I have. Not that I'm sharing super personal stuff, but I'm like, oh, I'm not so worried about it stealing my ideas or this other stuff that I really had hangups about. And so when you open up that space in your own life, you're really opening up space for your own ideas and your own little recalibrations of those trajectories, whether it's spiritually, financially, emotionally, with relationships, with your own health. We need to be constantly changing what we're doing and adapting, because it's a moving target and the rate of change is ever increasing. So we need that space more than ever. And, honestly, it happens to me too, it happens to everyone. When you get sucked down that rabbit hole, or you're just scrolling, or you're just on email and you're not doing anything, you're just staring, walk away. That's the walk away moment. Even if you're doing something really productive, walk away and come back. So open up that space as a reaction to your time wasting, to the stuff that you're just caught up in. And you'll find that, like, man, I was spending an hour and a half on these random WhatsApp group messages and keeping up with this thing. Like, now I have 90 minutes where I can actually do something meaningful or hang out with my family, or go to the park or schedule an adventure. So, like, that's what opening space does.
I'm so happy you said that, because I feel this tension, and I'm sure everybody listening pretty much feels this tension, this like outsourcing versus insourcing, outsourcing our attention either for ideas or for just entertainment. Show me more cats riding skateboards. Versus like the insourcing of inspiration that you said, like that's where you go to have an idea or recall a conversation or make a new song. But it needs the container of space, and you have to be intentional about that now, because the tech and things like that in our lives has become so pervasive and so easy to just like think you're gonna just let me send that text message one quick, and then there's a notification, and then I'll find myself like, I just got lost for 30 minutes. What was I doing? And just like you, I have to eventually, like, my consciousness comes back online, and it's like, what are you doing? And I have to like get up and shake it off. I'll go put my feet in the grass or something like that. And
Right.
I think there is something, and it sounds so trite and too simple, but there's some magic in it, which is like just taking this evolutionary lens again. For the vast majority of our evolution, we did not have this level of stimulation and input and ideas and tech. We talked to the plants. We listened to the waters in the river.
Yeah.
Like, we just did that. We ponder-maxed all day long, pretty much. And then, oh, I'm hungry. I should probably go hunt something.
Yeah.
Like, we have to try and remember some of that. You know, we have to intentionally, whatever it is. And I'm very blessed where I live, you know, and it's intentional too, and it's not an accident, but I put myself in a place where at least the environment supports that. I have no neighbors. I've got animals to tend to, so at least like every day when I go out and do that, you know, I leave my phone in the house and I'm with the chickens or I'm with the pigs, and then I look at the trees and I listen to the birds, and you know, these things I feel like they're just slipping away more and more and more, and we're becoming more and more combined with our screens. And I think you're right, though. Like, they're incredible tools. They're going to be great amplifiers. But as Jim Quick says, if, you know, it's a tool you can use, but if it's using you, who is the tool?
Yeah. Love Jim, by the way.
Jim's the man,
great.
right? He's a quote machine. I love that guy. He's got all the quotes. For you, where are you at currently with that now? Like, social media, phone usage. Do you outsource a lot of it? Do you just try and have a very mindful relationship to it? How do you manage it?
Yeah. It's evolved over the years, but I've always been really keen on it being me. Aside from, for a long time there, kind of the model was, especially in the early blogosphere, publish out and reference back the original article,
Right.
that sort of thing. And so that would be scheduled and texted out. And some people at first thought that was weird because I'd be like hanging out with them, but tweeting out a blog article at 2:44, and they're like, but I was with you. And I'm just like, yeah, well, that's scheduled. But no, like, I don't have ghostwriters on social media or anywhere else for that matter. There's something about that for me where I feel like the word should be the word. And I don't think it should be that way for everyone, by the way. It's just kind of how I pursue this and think about this as a management of my own energy and emotions. Kind of. And so that has really kept me away from Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, all of that. I just never really got into that. For Instagram, I did have a big or relatively mid-sized Instagram account for many years there and during the TV show and that sort of thing. And it's one of those things where I see a lot of people in my life kind of get wrapped up in it, and I don't see a whole lot of benefit either.
Yeah.
It's helpful as well that my wife Allison has never, aside from having like a Facebook account that she kind of set up way back in the day just so it wouldn't be weird for dating, not having an account, and a little bit for work here or there or whatever. That was like, she's not on social media. And so that's kind of the happy norm is in the middle of me and her in that relationship. And so that definitely makes it easier for me to not have to participate. My parents as well don't participate. My brother doesn't participate. My other brother doesn't participate. So I think I have that going for me personally. Which is something that if you also have that or can set that up in your own life in some way, that's really nice, because it's not like I'm avoiding contact with or don't have a good communication relationship with these people. I just don't do it through Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. And also, you know, having had the time in the sun or whatever, the trade-offs of being more out there in the public sphere, for me, I don't enjoy it as much as other people. I'm kind of just a natural introvert. And so I don't really, like, I'll tolerate pictures of me being out there, but I really don't enjoy it that much. And the reason that I do tolerate is because, like, I have to for music, and I always have had to do that since I was a young kid putting out my music on the internet in the 90s. Like, I've just had to continuously get over that, but it's not something that I enjoy or am really that good at, to be honest. So that means that I double down and focus on my area of interest and strength, I hope, which is long form content, and really just make it about going out on podcasts, whether it's mine or being guests on other folks' shows, doing events and being a speaker there. And then just doing longer form writing. And, you know, I'm on Twitter. I've also had a newsletter for, well, I guess 20 years, depending on the continuity of this, but I started writing with a music newsletter a long, long time ago for the people who would come to my shows and when I was in different groups and that sort of thing. And it was as many as like 4,000 people sometimes. And then I just scaled that up and transitioned to other projects. And so writing for the newsletter has always been a thing. And I've got a Substack that I write for, and putting out books is something that I enjoy a lot more than putting out tweets, because it's, and once again, not to disparage any of this, because we're all a different part of the ecosystem and enjoy being in different pieces of it. But like, I love long form conversations, sitting down and going deep. I enjoy writing books and reading books more than just the quick whiz bang stuff. And I think a lot of that is just because I know, and I'll use an example from music. Like, growing up for me, the challenge was I was learning from a couple of little books or a teacher here and there. And there was only so much like that they could teach me. And it wasn't the stuff that I wanted to learn for the most part. Now you can learn and see anything. It's right there. But a lot of people are having a lot of trouble getting to the intermediate or advanced level, because it's just, once again, these 15, 20-second little licks. So you can play all these little licks, but you don't know how to play music. There's no backbone. There's no fundamentals there that are being learned and built upon. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is give people these fundamentals with the stuff I'm putting out there. And if it's at the cost of my own, like, being out there less or being less well known, that's perfectly cool with me, because the goal is really to get the ideas out there, as long as we're, like, getting by financially, which, like, we also need to calibrate that from time to time. It's like, which of these are passion projects and, generate a lot of meaning and purpose and service to the world, and which ones do we kind of have to focus on as good work to get by and just like keep the whole machine going. And it's always both of those things. It really is. And there are pros and cons. We've done the macro approach, having a giant team, well, not a giant, but like a big team, and being out there everywhere at once, all at the same time. And these days it's been more of like a micro approach, where we're small and nimble and doing the things that we really like to do on our own terms.
Yeah. It's very cool, man, and it's cool to see like you traverse the different versions of that, so you can like take what's useful and reject the rest. And I think it's very healthy that you've got that other kind of balancing and grounding side of you, that the rest of your family and your wife, they're just not in this world, and that's helpful. It's a nice reality check, because we confuse the screen stuff and the numbers and the metrics sometimes for reality. And then if I don't know, we have a clip that goes viral or something, and if I were to tell my wife, she'd be like, "Oh, that's cute, babe. Anyway, the baby needs changing."
Right, exactly.
So it's like, oh, okay, yeah. Don't want to get too caught up in that. And, I know you've had Tim Ferriss on the show, and he wrote a great blog. I think it's something like 5 reasons not to get famous. There's a lot of wisdom in it, but again, you gotta sometimes just learn the hard way. Sometimes I think it's important for people to really realize that, because there's all these crazy ideas now, where you hear that the stats coming out of schools, and most young kids, when they ask them what they want to be when they grow up, it's like, I want to be an influencer. I want to be famous on YouTube. I want to be a Mr. Beast. And it's like, I don't know if you want that, but I guess we've all got to learn. We got to go our own way and figure out and pivot. And like you said, it's always, life is constantly changing, and the target is moving, and that's one of the beauties of talking to you, and also one of the challenges too, because it's like, ooh, do we go here next or here next? Because there's so much, right? Like, you teased the seed oil thing before, and how you actually worked as like refining these to be used in machinery. And it's funny because colloquially, one of the things we say now about seed oils is like, these are engine lubricants that we shouldn't be eating. And you actually like, no, they are. I did that as a job. Tell me more about that.
So out of college, I had some loans, and I wanted to pay them off as quickly as possible. So I was working my butt off and took a job in strategy and management consulting. And so I worked on a variety of different projects, which I found really exciting, even though it was esoteric and bizarre stuff like pipeline technology or, financial systems, and just hopping from one project to the next. But ultimately, I started working a lot in the energy sector, and that led me to the alternative energy sector, which was, this is back in between 2006 and, let's say 2011, 2012, the years where we were already talking about carbon credits in the financial system. And we were talking about alternative energy and biofuels and biodiesels and electric cars and, hybrids and that sort of thing. So anyway, it was kind of like especially right before the recession. It was a bubble in the green energy space, almost, you might say. And so I was really encouraged by the fact that I love working toward a greater good and hopefully helping to save the world in one way or another. And so, being young and naive, I kind of took at face value what people were saying about that in the early climate change or just kind of green energy movement of those days. And that's not even early, but earlier than now anyway. And so working on these projects and looking at fuel and how you dilute it to make it go through pipelines, and also some of the engineering that's involved, like in going to these on-site visits and that sort of thing, learning about these fuels, I, from a very different perspective, learned about the food industry, because, you know, we have this problem of all of this oil that is not really food grade. And by the way, it wasn't really food grade when it was in the friolators and that sort of thing either, but here's where it's coming from, and here's where it's going. And there was this competition back then between, do we use this fuel that we're growing, you know, from the field and put it into cars or into people's mouths?
Wow.
And that was a big thing, still is kind of a thing. Or there's this other, much tinier marketplace of the spent friolator oils, and what can we do with that? And it turns out that back in the day, almost every tractor and the farm equipment would run on whatever oil you gave it. Diesels can basically run on anything. And so to test this theory, and as I was learning this, I bought an old Mercedes diesel in 1985 and ran it on vegetable oil in a biodiesel blend. And I drive it across the country, and every time I'm stopping at a stoplight, it smells like fried chicken or potatoes. And the thing, one of the issues with it was that it tends to gob up and gel up when it gets below like 40 degrees and it approaches freezing. So I remember by Santa Fe, I needed to rip out the fuel filters and replace it because it was all globbing up and I couldn't drive away until the sun came out. So anyway, learning about all this and smelling it and being up close and personal with vegetable oil, I decided way back then, early, I'm not going to eat this stuff. This is ridiculous. What is wrong with our food system? And working with some other companies in the food space and consulting, seeing how the people who work for these companies do not eat their own products and wouldn't feed them to their own children, that put up some red flags for me. And I'm like, oh, there must be more here. What's going on? But anyway, yeah, in the early vegetable oil times, there was a wave, there was a bubble. There is a lot of truth to this as well. This is a powerful fuel for tractors, for cars, for diesels. You can use it. And there are many ways to approach green energy. And the story that we've been fed this entire time is certainly a narrative. The truth is much more interesting and science-based and practical, and has a lot more about thinking about reducing and reusing than the recycling and spending more and buying new technologies. And it's like subtraction is usually the answer to all of this. And that certainly includes vegetable oil. I didn't need to know much more about it once I learned that it was a purely industrial process that, you know, it gave something to us that ultimately made us sick. And as soon as I kicked those out 15 years ago, my health got so much better. I did other things at the same time, like getting rid of most gluten-containing grains and not being so very afraid of saturated fats and red meats and that sort of thing. But really, kicking out the vegetable oils, I think, was one of the biggest wins that I had early that I'm happy to, you know, remain true to. Yeah. And I'm also very happy that that message is getting out there because, it's machine lubricant. It's gear oil. It's not something you need to be putting in your body. It doesn't matter if it's cheap. It's not food.
Wow. Yeah, and I feel like you've had a couple of like really interesting looks at the inside or like the nefarious side of conflicts of interest, or like a little bit of bait and switching. Like you saw the the kind of manufacturer of these oils wouldn't feed them to their own family, and that sets off a little spidey sense tingling. But I've also heard you tell the story about how you worked on an initiative around school, like food essentially, and that surprisingly that wouldn't be too much of a shocker to our audience, that if you actually change the quality of food in schools, you can reliably like increase children's health and probably like their test scores and IQ and such. But when you started to take that seriously, it got shut down. Tell me the story there.
Yeah. So when I was working in consulting, we worked in the private sector, which was what I was just talking about, but also in the public sector. In the public sphere. And when we did so, one of the clients was the Department of Education. And so we worked in partnership with professors from Harvard and other institutions to identify and study the top after-school programs in the nation. So we identified basically a couple dozen of the top performing schools that took these kids that generally weren't having a high rate of graduation or performance and weren't pursuing college, and within a few short years, turning that around completely. And so we were identifying these schools and then looking for the mechanisms. How did they do this? Was it great teachers? Was it paying the teachers better? Was it being out in rural environments? Like, what were the different metrics? So we kind of had all these spreadsheets and did all of this work, and it took over a year, and did all these site visits as well, and met with the kids and met with the teachers. And there were a number of factors that were making improvements. And a lot of that was based around areas of interest for the kids, and being after school programs. It didn't have to be strictly academic either.
Right.
It could be a book club or have multiple activities, but oftentimes the kids were coming for the activities, which was about sports and games. And sometimes it was about kind of the enrichment that was there, which could be a computer or books that they could have around. But more than anything else, the thing that we found that turned these kids around was if there was a high quality source of food there, or if even there was food there at all that was reliable for them, then they would show up to these classes and courses and programs for the long haul. They wouldn't just show up a couple of times and hope to be interested, but they weren't, because they've had a tough background and they're dealing with stuff and having trouble at home. And so they're not going to come unless they're really interested or unless there's food there. And so it was having the high quality source of food there, combined with this area of enrichment. But without the food, they would never stay long enough for this thing to happen. So it was like this critical thing. And we put this big report together and delivered it to the Department of Education and all the higher ups there. And I was really happy, and so were a lot of the professors, and we were stoked. We're like, this could really change the face of education in a lot of ways, because this is not how schools are built. Maybe some charter schools and private schools here and there, and especially these days, it has gotten better in certain circles that way. But we thought, man, if schools knew this at the public level, this could really make a big difference, and they could put this into action. And so basically, long story short, the government was like, okay, thank you, put it on the shelf. You guys don't need to talk about this anymore. You're paid. Go on. Move on to the next thing. And after that happened, I was so deflated after feeling like we wasted millions of dollars, by the way, like millions of dollars. And I wasted, more importantly to me, not that I wasted millions of dollars. It wasn't my money at all. I wasted more than a year of my life, as did everyone else who was working on that project. So I didn't want that ever to happen again. And this was my attempt at changing things from the top down, from within the system, right? And then I re-examined that and tried to build from the bottom up, grassroots. And that's what really encouraged me to have the motivation to write fiercely. And I was writing fiercely for a long time, podcasting fiercely to get this message out there, because I got burned. I can see other people getting burned. And you all deserve to know this. And so if there's a way to get this out there, then I'm perfectly willing to be the mouthpiece of that. And as long as my energy is there, then I'm still willing to keep that fight going. And I think we are making progress, but sometimes it doesn't feel like we're getting as far as we should.
Yeah, I feel that. And I hope, because I agree, it's felt for such a long time like this. It is a grassroots movement. It's a bottom-up movement. And it feels like we're on the precipice of maybe some momentum from the top down.
Yes.
Certain figures getting involved. There's actually a conversation globally happening now, Make America Healthy. Like there is at least a conversation, but it's wonderful that you transitioned and kind of redirected that energy into this bottom-up approach and like educated people. But it's still very frustrating why, when you take that, and there's very clear evidence, and I'm guessing there's no shortage of budget concerns here for the public school system. Like, why exactly is it so difficult to change things from a top-down approach when the evidence is clear? Something like, hey, feeding these kids better outcomes. We've got the evidence. It makes a lot of sense. We've probably got the money. Let's do it. And all of a sudden they're like, crumple that up and throw it and pretend it doesn't happen. Like that. What do you think is going on there? Is it just like our food system is so corrupt? It's so corporately captured? Like, what is that?
I think it's incentives, and it's the system itself is just not built with those incentives in mind. That's what I realized is working with the Department of Education. I figured that they would be concerned with how do we educate American children as best as possible, and beyond America too, by the way. But that's not what at least that government organization was doing at all, or at least the people who were working there who I interacted with, that wasn't really on their radar, much to my surprise. And so I think part of it is because it's that phenomenon when you hear about, someone in your neighborhood who dying. It's an absolute travesty. But you hear about 42,000 people dying in some disaster somewhere, and you're like, oh, that's awful. Like, sounds bad, but I don't feel anything.
One death is a tragedy, 1,000 is a statistic.
And that's what was going on in real time at the Department of Education and in some of these other areas too, because they're so divorced from the day-to-day interaction with actual children that it doesn't even compute that that's what they're doing there. It's like Severance, that TV show or whatever, where it's just, you're a number monkey moving numbers around. You don't know what they do or what is happening on the other end. And I think there were a lot of good people there, but the system is just not built to help support kids that way. Even if you're going through the motions of doing the work, but it's not going to do anything because, once again, it's the incentives at play with these. If you look into the backroom contracts that Coca-Cola and some of these beverage companies have with schools, and the millions of dollars that are being funneled into these schools only by virtue of the fact that they have soda everywhere, which we know for a fact is destroying kids' health and everyone else. They're so immensely profitable that a lot of these schools don't have enough budget that comes from anywhere else to really even keep going. And so they are underfunded, but it's not due to a lack of money being out there. It's just the money is being siphoned off to these other initiatives that are being put on a shelf or just kind of like, a lot of, once again, backroom deals and back scratching, and who knows where the money is going, but it's not to support the kids. And that's what really matters. So when I hear things like plans to shut down the Department of Education or what have you, it sounds extreme, but my experience is such that I don't think that we should get rid of government entirely, but directionally we should go there and head in that direction to really subtract as much as possible, because there's such an extreme amount of waste and nonsense and just par for the course stuff that's going on that we deserve better, and the next generation not only deserves better, but like there's so much at stake here that we don't have the time to just kind of goof around and pretend that this isn't happening. Like the next generation will be far worse off than ours and the one that came before us if we don't make major changes right now, I think, to the food system, the education system, and so many other things as well. And so the powers at B, or the powers that shouldn't be, or the ones that are kind of there right now that are losing their footing, I think that's all well and good. And we need to be building parallel systems at the same time, not waiting for them to fix it or for it to get better. It's probably not. And I don't know if they can fix it from the inside. So the alternative there is to build a parallel system, or do whatever you can in your own local communities to make these things happen. Listen, it doesn't have to be an officially sanctioned after-school program for kids. You can just start your own little soccer league and have, grass-fed organ meat hot dogs there as just like a goofy thing. It's like, hey, kids, come eat eyeballs and brains and play some soccer. This can be something that doesn't have to happen within the normal guises of institutions that we recognized before.
Yeah, I think we've really got to reclaim our own power and sovereignty in that sense, that you don't need permission. And I'm the furthest thing from a economist or a political, pro on any of this stuff, but it feels to me like the system itself is so kind of rotten from the inside that it can't be fixed like in the same ways that it was created. It's almost like it has to just be like dismantled and rebuilt, hopefully on better, more aligned principles. And whilst we sit around and wait to see what happens there, don't just sit around and wait to see what happens. Do something, like whatever you can do, because a little bit goes a long way. And my wife and I have been trying to do this. Our kids are unschooled and we're in a homeschool co-op, and we do these events, and we think about these things and we start these conversations. And I would love to see a future where we can wave a magic wand and all these kids are getting fed real food, and instead of a cookie that's baked with seed oils, that they get fresh fruit, or like that they get some decent protein, and that we don't do mad things like they're doing in New York with meatless Mondays, when so many of these kids are not getting enough meat as it is, and now you want to pull it out all under the guise of the environment or CO2. And it's just like, wherever you look, it's like, oh, this is so fucked. It's so fucked. So I'm kind of like, maybe it's the inner anarchist in me that's just like, yeah, you know what, smash it all.
Yeah.
And because, like you said, if we just continue doing what we've done, it's kind of that Einstein thing, right? Like doing what you've always done and expecting different results is the definition of insanity.
Yeah.
And right now we can clearly see with so many things, but in particular education, it's not working well. Like the reading level is tragic. Like the health outcomes, the health system, it's not working well. So what are we going to do?
Yeah. Well, AI has entered the chat now,
Yeah.
and I think in the next few years, education is going to be unrecognizable. And I was just interviewing a man named Dan Fagello, who is an incredible researcher in the AI space and has been for a long time. And he basically said, and of course he's being a little facetious, but the top experts in this field have no idea what's coming or when, but it's coming, and it's coming fast. And AGI might be here in like before 4 years. Like a lot of the top experts are saying like that's on the long end of the estimates, could be faster. And so if you're considering how education will change now that, and you could argue this is already true, even though it wasn't true a few months ago, that a kid interacting with an AI agent is going to be a better educational experience than, you know, the teacher who's trying to teach 40 kids or whatever in some school where, you know, the kids who are really bright aren't getting attention because they can take care of themselves, and the ones who, you know, are being troublesome are just going to keep being troublesome, and everyone in the middle is, you know, throwing paper airplanes, you know,
it's a mess.
Compared to just like a computer that not only knows everything potentially about that kid, and there are pros and cons to this. Like I don't know exactly how I feel about a lot of this, but it's not something that we can ignore. And some people are really going to be doubling down on this. And also, like the next generation, I would assume, will really need to use this technology, and our generations too. I think not that we need to be jacking into the matrix and getting brain implants or anything like that, but the idea of not using AI for a lot of purposes in education and research and on the job or studying for a job, all the rest of that is kind of like not using the internet or not using email and making fun of your friends who were using email back then, or doing online banking. It's like, I remember being made fun of for doing banking online and for using the internet or for writing emails and like all this other stuff. And it's coming, like it's already there. And so, I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens in education. I'm really encouraged by the fact that this could be extraordinarily good. This could also be horrifically bad.
Right.
It'll be both, though. And to your point, like, I wouldn't want to be in certain places, most of them up north or in other countries across the pond that aren't as conducive to asking questions or saying what you mean or being who you are, and some of these other really concerning things, not just for adults, but especially for kids coming up in the world. So it might take something as radical as moving to an entirely different place, as you have, and as I have as well, and many of us who are here in Austin or the South or Tennessee or what have you, even people up in New Hampshire, the world of live free or die. Like, there are people who are carrying on the tradition of independent thought and curiosity and intellectual pursuits outside of the guardrails of a lot of these more top-down totalitarian regimes. And it's scary what's going on in certain places, and the thought crimes that are not just being floated out there, that people are actually being prosecuted for in certain parts.
In my home country, people are being arrested for posts they made on Facebook.
It's unbelievable.
Right.
Unbelievable.
Also, homeschooling is practically illegal.
Right.
God forbid you want to exercise any kind of medical freedom over what medicines or procedures you choose to have or not have. It's pretty wild.
Yeah. So another example of kind of, you create your own reality. You don't always choose where that reality is happening. So sometimes you find yourself in Tennessee or in Texas or somewhere else. But it's a powerful thing. Not that it's not really a luxury necessarily. I understand that not everyone can make a move like that. But if you set your life up for it, a lot of people can make bigger moves than maybe you were expecting. And that is what it tends to require if you're serious about this too. Because that's where the like-minded people who are also building are. That's where they're hanging out. That's where they're building. And that's really, as much as I love the nature, having lived in so many places like that, and up in rural Colorado and Tennessee as well. One of the biggest reasons that we're back in Austin and happy to be here is because there's so much taking place here, where people are taking action and really being at least trying to be a part of the solution. And for us, especially going out there and members of the family as well, and I kind of come from a family like this too, the homesteading approach and that sort of thing can be really powerful, but the thing that makes it the most powerful is your community.
That's right.
And so for us right now, that's in Austin, and wherever you are, double down on that, because that's it's really our future. And I don't know what it's going to be like when there's a really compelling case that as our technology gets more and more powerful in closing our reward circuits, we won't have a chance as humans in terms of how much time we're spending with each other compared to how much time we're spending with that agent, that robot, that whatever it is. Because if it can do the thing in your brain that scrolling has now done, or just screen time where you're getting sucked into it, it's like whatever the next generation of that is, we need to be very wary, because it's more powerful than our willpower. It already is. Yeah, AI is more powerful than our willpower. And maybe it's smarter than humans as well. It depends on how you define that. But if it's stronger than our willpower, stronger than our emotions, stronger than us intellectually, that's a reckoning right there. Because it doesn't just apply to you and the smartest person in the room. It applies to every single kid on Earth. And it's only going to keep going in that direction. So what do we do with that? I'm not sure. But let's stay nimble and adapt as best we can.
It's wild. It also doesn't stop.
It doesn't
need to pee, poop, eat, sleep.
Right.
It's just, it's fascinating. I have always been an optimist, if you will. I'm always going to choose that. And if the sky falls one day, I hope to be the guy dancing out in the rain as it all comes crumbling down, because like we were talking about before we even hit record, it's like no one's getting out alive. It's big. It can be scary at times. It's also very exciting because we're on the precipice of something that nobody can fully predict or harness, like exactly how it's going to change us. I'm a father. I have kids. Of course, I worry about the future and the world that they're going to inherit. But I also think, like to your point, trying to steer it is the only thing that we actually can do, trying to influence it so it doesn't go too rogue and it's not, Skynet goes live like the Terminator or whatever it becomes. But, it's fun, man. It's a fun conundrum. It can be heavy at times, but it's back to an individual call to action. Like all you can do is do your best. Stay informed, put yourself around the right people, learn some skills, and try to have some fun along the way.
Yeah. I remember growing up, I always wanted to be like born 20 or 30 years earlier, so I could experience the 60s and all the music and the revolution and that stuff. And it wasn't only until the past few years where I'm just like, oh, now I know why we're here. It's like we are built for this, actually. Like growing up in the 80s with all these gadgets and all the sci-fi dystopian stuff about AI technology. It's amazing how far back a lot of this stuff really goes. Even VR back into the 50s and 60s and brain-shocking technologies. Like it's pretty wild. And we don't know what's coming next. It's completely uncertain, more uncertain than ever. And I think we actually are built for this.
Yeah.
Our parents' generation was built for the world 10 years ago. And that's what it felt like too. And we're better positioned for that. But I think we're now seeing that you need maybe you don't need to be digitally native to exist now, but you need to have some functionality there and some appreciation. And I think it's the people who are hybrids like we are, who kind of grew up without it, but also, are able to use it. Not that I use TikTok or whatever, but like are able to use technology, who can bridge that gap.
That's right.
And help steer this a little bit. Because if you're unmoored, just coming up, immersed in all of this, I'm not sure that you have the same perspective as someone who's kind of raised the old way before all of this with your feet on the ground.
The old way, this might be a ridiculous comparison to draw, but like the old ways, lost ways. I think about like old definitions of what a shaman was, and there's different like interpretations, but one is kind of this person that has the ability to walk between worlds. Like it has one foot in the world of reality and the material, and one foot in the world of the mystic, the mysterious, the unseen, the energies. And maybe in a way, like these modern hybrid humans that had 1 foot in the world of like, I actually grew up and didn't get a cell phone until I was 18, but now 1 foot in the world of, and I used it and now I get it. They're kind of like the modern shamans in a way, like ushering in what is coming. Digital shamans. We don't need to, wear the robes and have the beads and all of that stuff, but it is a very interesting thing to consider. Because I'm like you, man. I'm excited by it. There's a little bit of terror maybe in there that it bubbles up sometimes. I'm like, no, let's choose the excitement instead. We're gonna find out one way or another.
I mean, there's an optimist or many optimistic versions of the future and visions of the future too. Like I remember growing up with Star Trek: The Next Generation and Jean-Luc Picard or whatever, and they're always talking to the computer, and the computer is generally helpful and the smartest thing in the universe until they meet Q or whatever. But the point is, it doesn't have to be the dystopian, sloppy, nasty version that many are trying to paint it as. We really will have both, but it's up to us, like which one we choose. And I think that we just need to be really intentional about that. And I love technology. I mean, it's such an incredible thing to be able to have that one-to-many type of communication. I've been doing it for a long time, and it blows my mind how many people I don't know who do know my work, who I continuously meet. And that's such a enriching experience, hopefully for everyone, because we're all real people doing this, and we can be part of the solution and part of a community. And once again, it all comes back to the humans, because it's going to get weird. It already is. And I am worried about like, what is for your kids and for the generation coming up, like what is their meaning and purpose going to be? We know what it was for generations past, or we could kind of approximate and guess at what it was. And we kind of know what it is for us, but I have no idea what that's going to look like, especially the future of work, the future of the financial system.
Right.
It's really going to be bizarre. We need to be not too entrenched, ready to adapt.
Yeah, like metabolic flexibility is something we always talk about. Now we need whatever version of flexibility that is as a human to stay nimble. And I think it's a very healthy call out to not get so focused on the dystopian view of the future, which is always the one that ultimately plays itself out. It's probably the oldest religion in the world, is believing that the world is ending. And every people that have been here before us always think the sky is falling, or some god is gonna, whatever. So it's like, oh, what if the utopia is coming too? What if the new earth is wonderful and beautiful and it's ushered in by this very transmission? At this point, we're just pontificating. It's two sides of the coin. Both are equally true. So you can either choose to think the sky is falling, or choose to think that we're going to usher in a completely new reality that's going to be friggin' awesome. But we'll just have to wait and see. Stay tuned. To be continued.
Yeah. And well, we've been on the precipice of atomic worldwide destruction since the 40s. For a long time, that never stopped either. And so hopefully that's an example of, maybe things aren't as bad as we thought they were. There have been some tense moments. It could be extremely tense right now. It probably is for a lot of people. Yet we're still here. And hopefully, even in the face of an AGI arms race and all of the potential horrible things that could happen there, we'll be protected similarly as we have been this entire time from worldwide destruction. And so I just don't think that obviously it's completely out of our control, but I don't think it's that useful also to worry about it too much. As much as it scares me, I think there's a lot that's really exciting, and it's been encouraging to play with some of these tools in the past few months and realize that they have gotten, because it was bad a while ago, and it really has improved. And so for the future of education and the future of humanity, this can really be, and I don't see why it wouldn't be, the best thing ever for everyone. Like, it really should be. There's no reason that this shouldn't be the best thing ever.
Right.
So let's make it that.
Yeah. What a fascinating conversation. We went all over the place, and I love that. I knew it would. I knew this would go in all different kinds of wonderful, weird, and fascinating directions. To try and bring this one into land, what's next for you? What are you passionate about? What are you currently pouring yourself into the most?
Yeah, so I'm playing plenty of music for sure, and I'm writing a new book about longevity, and a few other books and projects as well are in the works, but most of it can be found at my main website is abeljames.com, and I have a Substack. I have a podcast called The Abel James Show, which goes way back with many familiar faces and that sort of thing. And then also I'm trying to keep a piece of myself and my energy open as a free agent a little bit for whatever that thing is that's coming, because I have a sense that it's not all bad. We can all kind of feel the pressure building, but it's important to be ready for something.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm not sure exactly what the future is going to look like, but I have intentionally opened myself up to be able to pivot or adapt a little bit or jump at something that seems like the world needs.
Yeah.
Because I think people need to be kind of at the ready. And I'm not talking about like world war or something. It's more just like everything is changing so quickly, and there are a lot of solutions popping up. There are new universities having lectures that I just went to last night, going to another one tonight. There are new podcasts, new people entering the field, new research out. It's a really exciting time. So there's a lot to be excited about, and mostly I just as much as I was saying that I didn't enjoy the Instagram experience and that sort of thing, being in the public sphere, there's nothing that I like better than hanging out with people who do listen to the podcast long form, because those are my people, right? Like those are the best conversations, the best interactions. So it was more just the superficial stuff where people are there because it's a thing or a celebrity or whatever that is not worth getting caught up in. It's the real human interactions, though, that are going to save us all.
Yeah, and that's these folks that have made it this far, the band of weirdos that we're trying to hang out with and trying to create this new earth with. And like you said, be ready, because the word that comes to mind for me is opportunity. There's unbelievable amounts of opportunity. So be ready for that. It doesn't mean, doomsday and get all your canned food and load up on your ammo. Although if you want to do that, you can do that too. But be ready to strike on the opportunities that are ahead, because there's an abundance of them.
Definitely.
The world is changing fast. So thank you, man. Thank you for your continued thoughts and everything that you're going to continue to contribute. But also thank you for influencing me over a decade ago, and in a way I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing without voices like yours and all the information that you've put out in the world, and I'm sure you're going to continue to do it. So we appreciate you, man.
Oh man, I appreciate you too. Thanks so much for that.
Thank you. All right, you lot, we will see you next week. Stay radical, stay free. Peace out. All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.